Questions?
Any questions? We can try to field those.
Peter, you had said 2 million acre feet of lines behind the dam. That, in my dim memory, Army Corps was saying 7 million. Does that mean the remainder will just remain on the terraces?
Yeah, there is that we do believe there's about 8 million cubic yards of sediment behind the dam currently. That process of eroding or head cutting through that sediment when the flushing occurs will mean that there will be essentially a notch through the dam reservoir sediment. And once that notch or once that head cutting occurs, the river won't be able to erode all that sediment that's been deposited. So probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the sediment that's there will stabilize, and we'll be looking at planting native plants and essentially restoring that sediment in place.
How many single homes are there to actually acquisition?
We're working on that. I don't have a good answer for you on that. Sorry. Check in with me in about 3 months.
I'm curious about the 12-foot diameter bores. And how thick are the plugs that are left? Maybe this is to AECOM, I don't know. But are those bores done in advance, or is that?
No, the bores are done in advance. That'll take some time.
They sit there and they're opened up and they rest until a predicted storm comes, and then some dynamite folks get in there and plant.
Yeah, envision 2 parallel 12-foot diameter orifices from downstream to upstream, bored up until an engineered plug, and we don't know the thickness of that yet. And then in that plug, from within that orifice, there'll be drilled charge holes where explosives would be placed. They wouldn't be placed until in advance of the event, like we talked about.
3-day window.
Yes.
Pretty exciting work.
I'm going to talk to the people who do it and ask them if they thought it was exciting.
Yes, sir. Back to this.
What's the involvement, if any, currently of the Army Corps?
Currently, they're not directly involved. I just exchanged emails with one of the contacts we have there. I invited him to the meetings this afternoon, and I think that we'll be looking to see if there's any opportunities for them to be part of the project as we're moving it forward. It's hard to tell at this point whether they will have a way to do that. I think the project is on a course that we're looking at trying to acquire the funding with or without them. But it's hard to imagine that given them getting onto the process that we're already embarked on, to say no to money. So we'll be talking with them, but and of course the Corps of Engineers has a regulatory function through their 404 permit, but from the civil engineering side, it's not clear whether they'll have a role or not. Yes.
I'm curious about what kind of, how often, in the last 20 years, have we had the rain event that you're talking about, the 4.5 inches in 24 hours or 8 inches in a 3-day period of time?
If you looked at the hydrologic record, and they went back to 1965 or so, what we call recurrence interval, how often does it happen, is on average about every 3 to 4 years.
But if you just look at, say, the last, is there any plan to factor in climate change, less rain, less frequency of rain? I'm just wondering about how you're anticipating this event to happen.
The model that for the prediction of rainfall would be the same. It just may, what the characteristics you're talking about, may lengthen the waiting period between the time you're ready for the tunnels to be opened and how long you have to wait for that storm event to occur. If they're coming less frequently, you have to wait longer.
Yeah, but I guess my expectation is we may die before that event happens. And I'm just wondering, is there any backup plan for just letting the sediment, if you look at the budget for this project, $150 million, how much is actually dam removal? Not levees or bridges, but 50 million for the dam removal
Or thereabouts.
and 100 million for all the other projects to manage the sediment, right? That's what we're talking about?
Right.
100 million to manage the sediment for a $50 million project. What about managing the sediment in smaller increments, starting now? Starting now, doing some more of the notching, doing some more things to take smaller and smaller amounts of the sediment, and spend your $100 million getting rid of the smaller amounts of sediment instead of all these big infrastructure projects.
There's trade-offs, ma'am. I'll answer part of your question, and Peter probably has another answer ready. But there are significant trade-offs in releasing sediment over prolonged periods of time. Let's just say 1/10 of the sediment over 10 years versus all of the sediment that will be removed in 1 year. You don't want to prolong this long period of turbid water in terms of having to deal with the sediment, in terms of water diversion, and certainly the fishery. You just don't want to prolong that. That's why this plan tries to evacuate as much sediment as possible in one event. Do you want to go a different direction with that?
No, I think that was fine.
So you're gonna spend $100 million for a one-time event that's gonna have a lot of sediment? Is that right?
You can't not let the fish go upstream for consecutive years. This actual process enables the fish to not come upstream in 1 year and that's it.
Let me get a question back behind you there. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just gonna ask, what do you imagine the dam will look like as it's being exploded? Or how much of it will come down? Do you have any idea of how much cement is gonna be sort of blown which direction? Or
Could you repeat the question? Repeat the question.
She asked how much of the dam would be removed by the initial blast to remove the two plugs. So again, ma'am, just two 12-foot diameter holes, 2 feet taller than a basketball rim, a circle, from the downstream face of the dam bored upstream and stopping at a pre-engineered point, and then concentric circles drilled into both of those plugs, and then a series of charges that remove that plug concrete in small enough chunks for the force of the water to take it out. So when that charge happens, you won't even discern it from the outside of the dam, other than water will start to come out of those holes. No additional dam concrete is removed by that blasting, not in this initial, what we're calling a flushing event.
and then so the dam just stays there?
The dam would stay there until the flushing event is complete, until we've reached a stage of equilibrium, and then there are a number of different discussions underway now as to how the dam would be removed. One option is to have a berm on the upstream face of the dam that would come up to elevation slightly less than the height of the dam. You'd use hoe rams. You see these large backhoes that have like a jackhammer on the front that would take out part of the concrete. The part of the concrete that's been removed now has been done by saw cutting large chunks and then removing those. And then there are some other methods as well.
And then, that's good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering if seasonal off-channel water storage is being considered for flood mitigation and recreational opportunities and groundwater recharge. Seems like, the holistic design of the waterway could include seasonal off-stream storage to help with all the flooding issues you're dealing with.
Well,
Repeat the question.
I actually am not sure I quite understand it. You're talking about mitigating floods or mitigating water supply?
I mean, mitigating flooding, but also providing more recreational opportunities for the community and groundwater recharge, just that, if you're dealing, everything seems to be sort of an older model of levees, rather than looking at, additional off-stream storage in the form of seasonal.
So you're thinking of like creating some off-stream reservoirs that would take water?
Exactly.
Yeah. That may be beyond my pay grade as far as water rights and creating additional, water supplies. We're looking primarily at looking at ways to mitigate the impacts of the dam removal on the existing water supply owners. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we're handling it. So we're not looking at new off-stream water supplies as part of the project.
I'm curious again about the orifices. Where are they in relation to the water line in the forebay, if that's what you want? How high up are,
How high above the,
I guess in the forebay, the water on the downside, the creek side, how high up are they above the water?
well,
There
it hasn't been determined yet. They'd be approximately aligned with the original stream bed. The elevation hadn't been determined yet. If we coffer dam the downstream tail bay, we can get the orifices in lower, obviously, right? But it's a much more expensive operation. And then when we land the orifices upstream, we don't want those so deep that the sediment that's in front of them won't start to liberate and come through.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, if you put them up too high, it's only gonna last for a while, and you're still gonna have all that sediment back behind the dam, correct?
The target,
And if you put them down too low, how's the flow? Not, it seemed to me, I mean, I'm no engineer, but I mean, it seems like we just put the dam.
No.
It wouldn't force anything out, or is the sediment now, is it so gooky juicy that it'll just run out?
I showed you the photograph of the geotechnical drilling operation, right? So the water was very consistently 9 to 10.5 feet deep down to what we call the mud line. That was where we start to hit that soft duff. And the drilling depths to hit the alluvium, which is the rock and cobbles that were original stream bed, ranged from 66 feet to 86 feet. It was very uniform. So the target would be to get those orifices down where you approximate the original stream bed, so that you're basically restoring stream flow, but you're taking those roughly 2 million cubic yards of fine sediment through it. And whether that ends up depending upon what the tail bay elevation is at the time, whether or not we have to deal with tail bay water through a small coffer or not, that hasn't been determined yet.
And
That's very good explanation.
one
How
other,
deep is the water now?
Consistently, when we did the geotech boring, it was 9 to 10.5 feet across, but there have been a couple of events since, and we know that it's shallower now, 7 or 8
it's
feet.
probably 5 to 6 feet deep, 4 to 6 feet deep. So I did want to mention that part of the design concept was that there would be essentially chutes that would be installed upstream of each orifice that would allow water to go straight down on top of the orifice. And that component, we believe, would mix up the water and sediment right there at the front of the
You mean
orifice.
like big culverts?
No, they would be essentially run right along the upstream side of the dam. So they would be basically like a straw that would be right up just above the orifice, and that way, when they were charged, the water would then push that sediment, mobilized sediment, right in front of the orifice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool.
Yes, sir.
It sounds like we're moving forward with the smaller projects downstream of the dam prior to the bigger picture dam getting full approval and funded. So we're starting the project on Santa Ana Bridge, and that's going to be on Cielo Bridges as moving forward. We're making the decision to do those smaller items prior to the big job.
Well, we do have this 2004 CEQA document, and we did have an opportunity to apply for grant funding from CDFW. They had some Prop 68 that was passed, was it a year and a half ago? And some Prop 1 money. And we had the design for Santa Ana done. We had completed that with Coastal Conservancy money from about 5 years ago.